Welcome to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball. You never know what special guest may stop on by any given day. Now here's the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Jones.
All right, great to be with you. Back from California, rolled in about 6 this morning. And let's get to something that we told you would happen, and that is the new Department of Education ruling on Title IX and financial distribution in the House settlement.
And let's go back, first step, what is this revolving around? What are the basics, parameters of this?
Well, first of all, the House settlement's not done yet. April 7th is supposed to be the day where we get from Judge Claudia Wilken what everybody thinks will be a thumbs up to the deal. This doesn't mean she can't come back with questions and delay it. She could do that. She's already done that once, which is her prerogative. I mean, she's the one that's been overseeing a lot of these cases, from the O'Bannon case now to this case. So the Biden administration, in the waning hours of its existence, as we've said, I think it was on a Friday, and President Trump took over on a Monday. I think it was on a Friday. They put out, quote, guidance that the $20.5 million, their guidance was divided evenly between men and women, 10.25 to men, 10.25 to women. As we said at the time, I said there's going to be no change in the approach here because it is guidance. And that's what they'll come, well, it's guidance, and we looked at it and decided not to follow it, which then, of course, would bring with it a court challenge. Okay. All right. So now the Trump administration has done exactly what we said they would do. They came out today and rescinded it. They said Title IX is about opportunity, and when it comes to the distribution of money, it's up to the athletic departments and the universities as to how they do it. That in turn will also bring with it a court challenge. Right? I mean, both, no matter what was going to happen, there was going to be a court challenge.
Yeah, it was going to happen regardless.
Because the athletic departments were going to determine as guidance, reject the guidance, which would bring about a court challenge. Okay? Now the guidance is, hey, you do what you do what you want to do as to how you want to distribute the money as according to the settlement, and go from there, which will bring with it a court challenge and a lawsuit. You already have in Oregon 2 cases, one by the Oregon women's beach volleyball team and one by the Oregon women's club rowing team. Over here in the back, you're a club team. I'm confused. So they'll be able to do what they plan on doing until the courts say otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's going to play out, because there will be legal challenges to this.
Of course, as there is to many things.
Right. I mean, that's why we try to tell you where the money goes and where it doesn't go. We try to do that because it is important to do that, so that there is, if you listen or watch this podcast, we try to take the numbers and distill them for you to let you know that your favorite sport exists in part because of what they do in football and, to a lesser degree, men's basketball. Now, I have found out through research that there are actually 2 non-football and men's basketball programs in the Big Ten that did make money last year.
2 programs, non-football, non-men's basketball.
Right. That actually did turn a profit last year.
Can you give me a region of the U.S.?
Well, it's in the Big Ten,
but
so it'll be in the western part of the Big Ten, not the far west. I'm talking about the among the 14 members, Midwest.
Iowa women's basketball.
Nope, and that's all the stories written about Iowa women's basketball have been incredibly disingenuous. It's almost stunning. Just tell me they lost money. They did. Okay. All the stories have danced around. They got more revenue than ever. We all assume that. That's great. But they also had more expenses than ever. Okay, what's the final plus minus on it? But they didn't make money because guess what? We found out that there are only two non-football or men's basketball programs in the Big Ten that made money, and Iowa's women's basketball was not one of them.
So what two programs was it?
Minnesota men's ice hockey. Okay, that's one. And you think about it because I think Mariucci's a good size arena. I think it's 8,000 to 10,000, and they sell out all the time. And plus, it's not just Big Ten matchups they have. They can regionalize their schedule because there's so many hockey programs in the state.
The St. Cloud school comes down.
Duluth. Yeah.
10,000, by the way, is the number.
10,000.
3M Arena.
Right. And the other one is Nebraska women's volleyball. Made $1.3 million.
That makes sense because, again, they're the equivalent for here in Penn State with wrestling. Same thing there with women's volleyball. That women's volleyball program, I mean, they put on games in their football stadium, which is just absurd.
Right.
And they sell it out. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Devaney, it used to seat 13,000. I think it's now down to 9,000 or 10,000, but they sell out all the time.
8,300.
8,300. Okay?
But they sell it out, and then again, they move games to the basketball arena. They move games to the football stadium.
Yeah, going to basketball in the arena, first of all, Nebraska has a sweetheart deal on the arena. The city owns the arena. But Nebraska has a sweetheart deal on it. It helps. When they go to the football stadium, it's great theater. You're like, wow, look at there's 90,000 people here. But it also brings with it expense.
Yes. It costs more to be there, but also it generates a lot more. So it's kind of like what's
the marketing of it is incredible. It's like when I talk about the blue-white game. I said one of the great things Penn State does at the end of the blue-white game is they let the fans go on the field, and here are little kids out there running around on the field, and they'll never forget they ran on the field at Beaver Stadium, the same field that Saquon Barkley ran on, the same field that Micah Parsons made tackles on. They'll never forget that.
Yeah.
That's better than any marketing campaign you can put together.
Memories are better.
Well, same thing with this. Caitlin Clark and Iowa women's basketball playing in Kinnick Stadium, which, by the way, benefited the Children's Hospital, okay, did so much for the sport, right? Not just Iowa women's basketball. It did a lot for the sport. Wow, look at this place. But it also brought with it, if you're just doing the money part of it, it's exponentially more expensive to put it on there. Okay,
it costs more to have more people.
But to me, it's worth every dime because it puts it out there. Because you can make Iowa Athletics did make a profit of $2.8 million last year, so they can afford to do that. Okay, it's right in that range of where you want it to be, and Nebraska women's volleyball had one in the stadium. But again, the marketing value of each of those ventures, you can't put a price on the marketing value of it because it drew national attention to the sport and to your team. And that's what they were hoping to do with it. And it drew national attention when Caitlin Clark had the exhibition game with her team against DePaul. It drew national attention when women's volleyball at Nebraska played in the football stadium. Now, the people in the upper deck, they couldn't tell you in a million years if the ball was in or out. In fact, there's a chance that some of them couldn't see the ball. Okay, the court's not that big.
But the point of it is they got to go and say they were a part of it, and they clearly went because they enjoy it. And marketing-wise, you can't buy that. You can't buy the fact that this is one of the very few times this has happened. So it's a memory. You can say, I was there when Nebraska played a game in their football stadium. Like that is a one-of-one thing.
Right.
So it is.
But those are the two that did end up turning a profit that were not football or men's basketball.
Yes.
And again, the Iowa.
Let's go away from Iowa women's basketball.
No, but I'm disappointed in the writers. Right? Stop dancing around it. You throw out a lot of figures. Just tell us if they made money or not. They brought in more revenue than the men's team. Great. That's fine. They sell out every game. I accept that. Right? I think that's great. That tells a story unto itself. But just give us the plus minus number. In other words, it's like nobody wants to admit that women's basketball loses money. Like everybody. Okay? If they can't make money, who can? And like UConn, for example, they play a game with it. UConn, when they report their numbers at the Department of Education, football expense revenue are dead even. Men's basketball expense revenue dead even. Women's basketball expense revenue dead even. In other words, they play the dead even game.
Yeah.
The same. Rutgers does the same thing. Right? Just give us the numbers so people know what we're dealing with here. Right? It doesn't take much to do that. And it's like, with all due respect to the people that wrote the articles, you did a lousy job. I mean, just tell us, hey, look, maybe they lost 100,000. Maybe they lost 1.8 million. I don't know.
Just say the number.
Just give the number. There's nothing wrong with the raw number, right? It tells you how difficult it is to make money in sports when you don't have mega TV deals, media deals. Media deals mean everything in all of this. That's why whenever I've talked about wrestling, it has nothing to do with putting down wrestling. You've got to be an absolute infant mentally to think that that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Right? It's the best program in the country. The whole deal. But the raw number tells you that without a mega media deal, and Cale could get a media deal for it, but again, the Big Ten has its media deals already set. So it ties his hands as to the non-conference part of the schedule of getting like a Flow Wrestling or something like that to televise it, because Penn State being part of the Big Ten, they are subject to the Big Ten media deals and cannot independently go out and do their own deal on non-conference. I mean, in other words, Penn State football playing Villanova can't sit there and go, you know what, this is really great. We got an independent deal for this one game to be on ESPN. No. Yeah, and that's the same for every sport. But the media deals, they mean that's how you get that. Those are the difference makers. Football needs to hit a certain mark attendance-wise to be a difference maker. Media deal, difference maker. Radio media deal, difference maker. And this is, and it's not, and I don't ever want to hear, well, they should spread it among. No, you don't spread it out. For goodness sakes, you've got to do it in such a way you sit back and go, wait a minute, okay, name the only two sports that are on Peacock. Name the only two sports that are on CBS. Name the only two sports that are on Fox. Name the only two sports that are on Fox Sports 1.
Yeah.
All right? Okay, which, by the way, makes up a huge chunk of the media deal. Now, BTN, different story. But BTN, again, I think Penn State was only on BTN twice for football this year.
Two games.
All right. Which is, I think, the minimum number you're supposed to be on. And in men's basketball, I think there have been 3 BTN pluses, so let's take those out. They're going to be on TV a minimum of 28 times. All right. Then there's the radio deals, which are football, men's basketball, and have a network for each. Now, men's basketball last night, it was, let's face it, this was a rough trip all the way around. They got Yannick back last night, and he was so excited to play the first time he got the ball. He spun around like a top eight times and then lost the ball, right? Because he was just too juiced, and he picked up 3 fouls in the first half. He fouled out of the game. He only played 12 minutes in the game, right? He needs to just settle down and just play his game. Ace was as live last night as I've seen in a while. I thought Ace played his best game since the Rutgers game. He was live. But you're going to lose games. I mean, when I sat down today, I decided to update everything on Penn State. I already have Washington almost done. They're going to play Ohio State tonight.
Yeah.
And when a team shoots 67%, 75% in threes, 82% at the free throw line, you're going to lose. Now, their goal was to take away as much as the inside stuff as possible and, play the bet on how they shot threes. Because they ranked last in the Big Ten in conference games in points from the three-point line. In other words, the percentage of points they get from the three-point line. So you make a bet. Agbo, but Agbo is a good three-point shooter.
He took a sledgehammer to that thought last night.
But he's a good three-point shooter, so I'm going to leave him out of this for the moment. Because, I saw Agbo last year at Boise because he was Boise was in the tournament we were in down in Orlando. Okay, so I know Chisbo can shoot, all right, and Agbo had a great night last night shooting the ball. But this is what you run into. Shelley is 1 for 8 on the season. Hit is only 3. Claude have been 1 for his last 4. Not a big, but he's not a 3-point shooter. He hits it. Who's the other kid?
Yates or St. Thomas?
No. St. Thomas hit 1, and he'd been 1 for his last 12. Yates can hit them. That's not Yates actually has been hitting them.
Yeah, he went 2 for 2 as well.
He was 7 of his last 13 in threes coming in. Trying to think who else.
Those are the other ones that hit threes last night. Those are the five guys to hit them.
Yeah, St. Thomas. Like St. Thomas, 3 of them had combined to hit 3 of their last, I think, 3 of their last 32.
And all of a sudden, all 3 go 3 for 4.
You're like, really? You're sitting there going, like one guy took the shot. I'm like, I'm good. Oh, brother.
Yeah. And then Agbo goes 7 for 9.
Right.
Which is just
But again, it's not like he's not capable of doing that. He actually is. I mean, that's and by the way, he had not been shooting. He had been 4 for his last 15 in threes coming in. But look, and so you're not going to win any kind of game like that. You're just going to have no shot in something like that. And part of it is they had the ability to drive the ball and then kick the ball back out. You got to be able to keep yourself between the ball and the basket. And the underrated part of what we saw last night was the fact that USC was 16 of 21 in layups, right? Which means they were getting in there.
And making the shots that they got
and making plays. And I thought Josh Cohen, I had a really nice talk with Josh before the game last night because Josh came over to me because he went to St. Francis his first 2 years. And he said, Mr. Jones, you know Rob Krimmel? I said, yeah. I said, of course I do. I said, Rob grew up in State College. Right? And he said, I know his dad really well. And I said, and Ken, his brother, played at Penn State. And so I talked to him. He said, I love being there. It was great. He says, please tell Rob I said hi. Now he transferred out. He went to UMass. I played for Frank Martin. That didn't go great. It's been okay for him at USC. He had a good game last night. I thought because they'd taken him out of the lineup. They were starting Rashawn Agee in his place the last 4 games. Well, they started him last night, gave him another chance, and Josh played very well last night for them. So it's a rough trip. Washington is next. Washington is going to be playing Ohio State tonight. In Columbus because that's part of their 2-game swing. That's how they have to do it with everybody. either you go out there and play 2 or they come here and play 2. And, of course, the 2 they always do is the Ohio State, Penn State swing. The other swing is when they come east, if they have to play Rutgers and Maryland, they do that as a combo. So that's who they have next. They're playing a little bit better. I don't think that's Danny Sprinkle's a very good coach. Grado Sabar is a really, really good player. Louis Courtwright is not going to play against Penn State. He did not make the trip. He has been suspended. And we don't know how long the suspension is going to be, but he is not on the trip, and he will not be, and he will not play.
And Penn State is now sitting here. They have 6 games remaining on their schedule for the season. Washington, as you said, coming up this Saturday. Then Nebraska, on the road to Minnesota, on the road to Indiana, home to Maryland, and then on the road to Wisconsin to wrap the season up. 6 games, and they currently, as things sit, are in the bottom of the Big Ten in terms of where they are standing-wise. And, of course, to get in, you have to not be a bottom 3 team.
That's right.
So I put the question on to you. Penn State's got 6 games. They have to go, 5-1 at this point to get in? 4-2? Like, how do they make their way into this tournament if they're sitting currently in the bottom? 3-3?
3-3, but you got to win one first.
I'm presuming you'd have to beat Washington, beat Minnesota.
Look, you got to beat somebody, okay? I don't care who's next.
They got to win a game,
okay? That's what it comes down to. You have to beat somebody and get some good feeling somewhere.
Yeah,
which changes at least the mental attitude about because losing is difficult. It also reminds you of how rewarding winning is, because winning is really, really hard. But you've got to be able to go out and you got to execute, stay connected. You got to get games to the last 5 minutes where you've got yourself a chance to win. They did not have a chance to win with 5 minutes ago at UCLA. Did not have a chance to win with 5 minutes ago at USC. There's no doubt to me that the damaging loss was the one at Michigan. The one at Michigan, they are up, 5 points, 2 minutes to play, had played really well over the 38 minutes to get there. Now, because again, you can talk about Iowa being a 1-point game, but Penn State came back, and if they won it, it would have been basketball robbery.
Yeah.
Okay? But they still had the ball with a shot to win the game. Michigan was different. You're on the road. Sunday's practice on Super Bowl Sunday was outstanding. Or it was AFC NFC Championship game Sunday. Was outstanding. I mean, like really.
Yeah.
I mean, I walked out there going, man, that's a heck of a practice. And then they went out and they played that way. Right? And normally when a team has the lead like Michigan does, and you lose the lead because Penn State took it away from them, you don't normally find another gear. It's a lot like in horse racing where they're coming down the stretch run. Horse has the lead. Horse gets passed. 9.5 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Okay? Maybe the horse that passed him doesn't win. Right? But the horse that got passed is not going to win. And all of a sudden, boom, it resurrects itself and wins. And that's happened a few times. Okay? We sit back and go, really? Well, that's what happened here. Normally when a team is in that spot and they lose the lead like that, and they're down 5, so you're down 2 possessions. And I remember exactly what I said on the broadcast, verbatim. When Michigan had the ball down 5, there was just under 2 minutes to play. I said, now here's the key part right here. Penn State stopping a score makes it a 3-possession game. Well, they didn't get the stop. And they didn't get the score. And you just kind of wonder what that did to the team. Because right now they're in this spot. 92 speaks for itself. But it's the fact that this team was a wide-open scoring team where 80 was not a problem for them. Okay? In fact, let's take a baseline of 70.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've scored 70 or more in 19 games this season.
Mm-hmm.
Not an issue.
Yeah.
But they haven't scored more than 70 during this run. Mm-hmm. The last time they scored more than 70 points was that Michigan game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They have not scored over 70 since. They have struggled offensively, compounding, of course, with the defensive part of it. I think in some ways they're letting maybe the defense affect the offense. They did have a lead on Minnesota, but then Minnesota passed them. As soon as Minnesota passed them, Penn State could not catch up to them. It's been that kind of run. Losing Puff Johnson has been big in so many ways. Mm-hmm. Big in ways that a coach appreciates. Anybody that's around it on an everyday basis appreciates, because he does a lot of things that maybe the fans don't hear and may not see.
Yeah.
And that's not a put down on the fans, because you're not going to be able to hear, right, in a full gym, the band's playing, the cheerleaders, whatever, you're cheering the whole thing. You won't be able to hear, like we always talked about John Hara being, quote, the mother hen back there directing everybody. Well, you do that through communication. The fans could never hear that.
Yeah.
Right? You hear it when you're in an empty gym at practice. That's Puff Johnson putting guys in the right spot, right? When they beat Purdue, people forget that, like, in that game, Yannick got into a little bit of foul trouble, so Puff played the 5, right? And there's other games where he played the 5. Right? Good offensive player, can hit the 3, gives you some length, a veteran, been around the block, communicates, puts people in the right spots, makes relatively few mistakes himself. That was on a team that is thin. That was a huge loss, because there's dominoes to that loss. And they have not really played well since they lost him. That one hurt. It's not as if other things haven't happened. But, for example, Nick Kern is much better as a player in 2 ways. Coming off the bench, and instead of playing 35 minutes, he's much better when he's playing 20 to 25 minutes.
You tell him to sprint for 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
He's got more juice in the tank, and it makes his action, his play, turns it up a notch.
And you're also then missing the possibility of times of having both Puff Johnson and Nick Kern on the floor at the same time, right? I mean, that's where you're losing, right? A guy that has extremely underrated basketball sense that made a difference to other players and made a difference in the program. You don't have that any longer. Now, Nick is starting. He's better in that 20 to 22, 23-minute stretch as opposed to giving you 35. But at the same time, with him starting, you don't have Nick Kern coming off the bench. You've got somebody else coming off the bench. Now, Dom Stewart, to his credit, I thought had an excellent West Coast trip. He has put himself in a position to absolutely earn more minutes. He's got the kind of shot that can really help you out. He's improved defensively. He's still got work to do. There's no question about that. But this is where they are right now, and that is
it's not a great place to be.
No,
in.
It's not.
And moving over to another Big Ten matchup that took place last night, Michigan State against Indiana. Tom Izzo is looking to break the record for Bob Knight for most conference victories. He remains tied with him at 353. They took on Indiana, and Mike Woodson and co. took down Michigan State and the Spartans 71-67. But I want to focus on less the Michigan State Tom Izzo part, more of the Mike Woodson part, because we have not, I believe, been on the show since the news has kind of come out. Mike Woodson looks like he is going to be stepping down and stepping away from the Indiana basketball program.
Well, let's see. What were his choices?
I know. But outside of that piece
of it. I'm not. I'm saying, what were his choices? I mean, first of all, Michigan State. Okay, I saw them obviously in person. You were there.
Yeah.
They're good. They're not great.
No.
Right?
They didn't impress us.
All right. I thought good, not great. Okay?
Yeah.
And the West Coast swing, they didn't win either game in the West Coast swing either. I mean, they went out to UCLA and USC, and they didn't win either game.
Yeah.
I think that the three of us walked out of the arena that night, and we all said that Michigan State would win its fair share of games, but would not get out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we don't know until you see the matchups, but still, just based on...
The team doesn't strike fear into you like teams in the past have, or like this team could, with Cassius Winston and co in the past, or like this team could explode their way to the Final Four.
Penn State
doesn't have that ability.
Penn State beat that team.
I know, but the point is that team you could think, okay,
so
maybe.
Now Indiana goes in there, and Indiana has been a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They have paid a lot of money. There's a lot of NIL money invested in that team. Not a little, a lot. When Indiana played Maryland, Maryland had a 1-point lead late. Mike Woodson, off a timeout, changes personnel. Now remember, they need a basket of any kind.
Just one. Something.
Right? 2 free throws. A basket.
A layup. Just something.
Something. And he took out inside guys and brought in shooters. And it's the first time I've ever watched a game where the fans booed the substitutions because they were booing him. And, of course, they got the ball in, took a 3, and it wasn't even close. You need a basket, not a 3.
And you sit there and say to yourself, and you look at this roster they have, and you're saying the best players are their inside guys. If I want a basket, hypothetically, I think Ballo and Renew are the 2 guys I'm putting the ball in the hands of.
Yep.
They're the 2 best players. Give it to them. Let them go to work.
Yep. And it's just, so he is in. He didn't have. This is not. I'm going to resign. That was him taking the high road and saying, "Hey, look, I'm not going to make you out to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
All right. I'll resign." Now I don't know what the what the numbers are in terms of the financial part of it, but he was not going to be the head coach in Indiana next year, whether you resigned or not.
Yes.
To their credit, they went out last night and resurrected themselves for one night and played obviously very well.
Yeah. They got the job done against the Spartans.
And I give them a lot of credit. That's give them a lot of credit because they haven't been playing well. But
on the Indiana portion, I as someone who has watched too much college basketball in his time, because as you know, growing up in Connecticut, like your pro sports team is UConn. That was what I grew up with. My pro sports team was UConn men's and women's basketball. It was Maya Moore and Kemba Walker.
Sure.
And Indiana was always a fixture on the TV. And you got to think this is a job that is of intrigue for a lot of people. And, of course, the name that's being tossed out right now is the current Michigan head coach, Dusty May, who, of course, is from Bloomington and is currently the head coach at Michigan. He's kind of being like, no, we're not discussing this. This, if I'm looking at it, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, seems like a pretty desirable job to almost anybody. You're sitting there, you're a Big Ten school, and you do have a large NIL purse for the basketball program.
How would you like to? Let me give you what I think is my assessment of Indiana basketball.
Let me hear it.
The plus. Here are your pluses. I think you have access to NIL money because of the passion around Indiana basketball. You have a passionate fan base. Okay? You can talk about tradition all you want, but let's take a look at the last 30 years of Indiana basketball. In the last 30 years, there's been one Final Four, Mike Davis, and went to the national championship game beaten by Maryland. For the most part, starting with Bob Knight's last 4 or 5 years. So let's go back to right around 94, 95, right around there, because I think his last Final Four team was 92, 93, I think. That was his last Final Four team. I think Calbert Chaney was on that team and so forth. they haven't done much. The Big Ten latches onto them all the time. You notice they get a lot of CBS run, right? They get a fair amount of CBS games.
Yeah.
They get a fair amount of Fox games. I mean, they do schedule some non-cons that are really good. But Indiana gets a lot of run, and Dick and I always confused, like, in the last 30-something years, they haven't earned that kind of run.
Yeah.
Branch McCracken and Bob Knight are no longer with us.
Yeah. The furthest they got in the most recent seasons was 2016. They made it to the Sweet 16 and lost to North Carolina 101-86.
They had been ranked number 1 during that season. Okay? But they haven't done much of anything. I mean, really, for a program that of allegedly that stature, they've been kind of like just another program. Purdue's been the best program in the state, like by a wide margin.
Purdue's been better. Michigan State's been better. Like,
I mean, there are a lot of programs that have been better than Indiana. Right? I know they won at the Palestra this year after winning by 1 point in the tournament last year, but Penn State had beaten them, I don't know, 3-4 times in a row.
They beat them. They beat them 3 straight times. Beat them back-to-back last season at home and in Assembly Hall, and then they lost on a buzzer beater, or a last-second shot, I think, by Leo.
But again, when you look at, like, it's got the name. But the reality is the performance hasn't matched the name. And that's why they keep changing coaches all the time. All right, Mike Davis was done out of necessity. I got that. Kelvin Sampson. And then that became a mess. And Dan Dockich took over for a few games. It was a mess. And then, not Dan, through no fault of Dan's, he just inherited that because he happened to be on the staff at the time. And then they brought in Tom Crean, and that's a mess. And then Archie Miller, who, like, I knew that was going to be a struggle. You want to know why?
Why?
Because if you look at what Dayton was doing, both performance and on the recruiting trail, every year they were stepping, like it was getting he got out of Dodge before
it got real bad.
It got to a point where they'd be calling for his head there, and he was still a hot enough name at the time. He went to Indiana, nothing happened. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Now they bring in Mike Woodson, Bob Knight disciple, NBA guy. NBA guys love Mike.
Yeah.
You want to know why they love Mike?
Why?
Because Mike was always the kind of coach that made sure they got shots.
Yeah.
Okay. He didn't win in the NBA, but boy, he had guys that, that's what the NBA guys love him, the players, because Mike got him shots.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's the way that league is. That's what that league is about. Okay. This flat out hasn't worked, but then again, it hasn't been working at Indiana for a long time.
And it's not like they haven't had players. They have had guys who are good. Khalil Ware last season, good player. It's just the system, as we noted last season, watching those games play, especially that first one in Assembly Hall, where you were just like,
but again,
it was basically give it to him and hope. And outside of that, they didn't have much. As we said, they couldn't shoot the three. There was issues in that team last year we're not even going to get into. But they've had him. Renew is at least a player. Mbako's good. You think, okay, Balo's decent. Like, they've got good players. In past seasons, they had other guys like Trace Jackson Davis. I saw him in the Carrier Dome.
Now he played all the way through with Indiana. And I want to give him credit because he's gone to the NBA and he's played with Golden State.
And he's been a good player for them.
Good player for them. But again, he wasn't surrounded by a lot of really good players. He just wasn't. They've gone into the portal. They've made mistakes. Now they got Ware out of the portal, so they got 1 year though. But the key is they got a year.
They got a year of him,
right? Renew is not an NBA player, So he's been staying there, which, I mean, you can be a really good college player, but I think Renew was a good college player, not a great college player. They haven't had a point guard to run the show. They really haven't. They've been trying to get them out of the portal. That hasn't worked. And it's not. Ballo has been good, not great for them this year. He was supposed to be the transfer of all transfers. Everybody had to have him. He left Arizona, and it's just. I mean. What's interesting to me is that a couple things. One, Indiana fans have not accepted that they're not the best team in the conference any longer. So they're somewhat delusional. And the Big Ten is somewhat delusional because they keep putting Indiana out there because of the name. And they don't.
You know what? May I make a comparison to Indiana? You know what Indiana feels like? They feel like they're in the exact same place right now that my Syracuse Orange are in. Pretty much one for one, it feels like. Because Syracuse, they have just enough history to make you think, okay.
Yeah, but their history.
Maybe.
Yeah, I guess I can see that because the history surrounded one guy, Jim Boeheim, who, to his credit, like Syracuse, in the heyday of the Big East, they were great. The breakup of the conference really hurt Syracuse.
Yeah.
They needed to find a landing spot. The landing spot was the ACC. Now, with a football, men's basketball program, and so forth, that's a stable landing spot. It's not may not be as financially lucrative as the Big Ten or the SEC, but Syracuse, when they went to the ACC, that's when things started to decline. Boston College has never had sustained success in the ACC. Pitt has not had sustained success in the ACC. Pitt's been okay. It's like they've won an ACC football championship and basketball. But see, again, Pitt was going around doing whatever they could in the offseason last year trying to get better non-conference games. Why? They won 21 games last year and didn't even sniff the NCAA tournament because the ACC schedule was so bad.
Yeah.
Right? And going to the ACC hurt Syracuse basketball. But they didn't have much of a choice.
There wasn't many other options. It was the best. It was the best case snenario in that.
They're not going to go to the Big Ten, right? You get people. Oh, yeah, it gives you New York. So I'm like, oh my God,
no. They're upstate New York. They don't reach anywhere beyond. No. They get Buffalo possibly, but they get Buffalo to Albany and anywhere in between there, and that's about it.
Right.
Somebody went to school there, and that's what it is.
And the ACC move was. Necessary because you needed to have a landing spot. But it doesn't mean it helps you beyond the TV contracts, dollars, the fact that Notre Dame might come to your place someday and play.
And they got Clemson. The Clemson football has been nice a little bit here and there. The Miami game this past season, of course, was a big one. Syracuse taking it down.
No, that's fine. And you get some stuff like that. And he's done a good job with them on the football side. But the move didn't help him. Overall, I'm talking, it did not help. And Jim retired, and you're really starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Boston College been the same way. Pitt's been the same way. It's just not what people probably hoped it would be. It is very much politically a Wake Forest, NC State, North Carolina, Duke conference. It's very much a Tobacco Road conference. And your conference can boost you or it can crush you. And the ACC has financially helped Syracuse and given them a stable landing spot, but it hasn't helped them in terms of performance.
Yeah, and performance-wise, and also in that is the recruiting aspect, which I want to ask you about a little bit, because it feels like conferences somewhat eat each other alive a little bit when it comes to recruiting, where you're all kind of recruiting the same, to some extent, not all the time. There's sometimes you're recruiting the same players, and it's like it's Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan trying to get the same guys in football.
Sure.
And then you took a Nebraska in there for a guy who's in that area. Or if you're in Iowa, maybe there's someone in Iowa you're trying to get, like so on and so forth.
Right.
In basketball, if you're Syracuse, you went from competing against those Big Ten, the Big East schools, to then having to compete with Duke and North Carolina. And as we know, if you're looking for basketball history, Syracuse is cool. They don't even sniff what Duke, North Carolina have.
Right. Sure.
And there's only so much you can do with that. And I saw this post up, and I just wanted to bring this up because this is just me crying a little bit on the inside. The worst record Syracuse ever had under Jim Boeheim, I want you to guess it.
The worst record?
Worst record they had under Jim Boeheim. What do you think it was?
You mean regular season or including the postseason?
Regular season. Worst ever record they had under
I would
Jim Boeheim.
say, let's see, 31 games. I'd say the worst record he ever had was
33 games. I'll leave it at
33 games?
Yeah.
I would say 19 and 14.
16 and 17 was the worst they ever were. They had one season. I remember this. I was in school when it happened. It was the only time they had ever had a losing record under Jim Boeheim. Was my senior year. 16 and 17. Once.
Yeah.
One single time they had a losing record. Outside of that, it was the same thing with Mike Tomlin, where it's just all winning records. Even if they're 500, cool. It's 500. It's better than being under 500.
Sure.
And right now they're sitting 11 and 14. And it's bad. And
yeah,
it's only going to get worse as a Syracuse fan. And I think Indiana has to accept it, like Syracuse fans now have, where it's like, it's bad, and we can accept that it's going to be bad. And I don't think Indiana fans are accepting that they're not the best.
I've said for years they're a somewhat delusional fan base. In other words, Indiana's been good, but they have been nowhere near great.
And then you get the talent like you do with a Khalil Ware, but you get him for a year. For Syracuse, we had Malik Brown. Yeah. Everyone was like, this guy's great. We should bring him back this next year. Syracuse decided to go into the portal, bring out someone else. Instead of keeping Malik Brown, where does he go? He goes to Duke. Spoiler, he's starting for them, and he's been a really great defensive presence for them. And we had him for 1 year. Same thing is going on. Khalil Ware, you have him for 1 year. He goes pro, and now he's playing with Bam Adebayo and the Miami Heat. And
you know what's interesting is that now Ware's not a one and done, but he's with you for 1 year.
He feels like a one and done.
You're right. In part because we didn't watch him play at Oregon. One and dones are interesting because John Calipari, for a period of time, made hay with one and dones. Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, they won the national championship and all. Okay. As time went, his record got a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, because I think you have to have a certain type of player, physically, mentally, and mature-wise, to do what you need to win, especially on the defensive end. Duke, Mike Krzyzewski went with the one and dones. Well, if Kentucky's doing it, we're going to do it. Look they won one national title.
Yeah.
Okay. Not multiple national titles. They won a national title. It was 2015.
Well, they also won 2009-10. In that kind of end of
10 was not a one and done. He wasn't doing one and dones at 10. I'm talking about the end of it. I'm talking about when he decided that we need to do the one and done thing like Kentucky is, which would have been after the 12-13 season.
One and dones, yeah.
12-13 is when Kentucky did the one and dones. Well, that's when Mike started doing one and dones. Right? They won the one title early and did not get there after that. And there have been many guys that are one and dones that are certainly talented. I remember Dennis Smith, for example, down at NC State. Right? And in the end, they ended up being coach killers. Why? Because, well, he's a one and done. You've got to win with him. And all of a sudden, like, you're looking around like, you're not winning. Well, why aren't you winning enough? Like, and it's interesting. Like, Steve Peichel has gone. He's got 2 one and dones right now. Ace Bailey is terrific. And Dylan Harper is terrific. Right? Well, guess what? Neither one of them will be there next year. And guess what? They're not in the upper division of the Big Ten. And it's you want talent. So, I mean, you're always in search of talent. And so, of course, if you have the opportunity to get a talent like that.
You get a talent like that.
But it doesn't guarantee you anything. And not only that, you've got to make hay in the 1 year you have them. Steve Peichel has to make hay with the 1 year he's got Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, because next year he's going to have to replace both of them.
You know what the best,
and they haven't made hay with them.
You know what it feels like for me when you see these one and dones, you see this going through so many of these programs is A, it's tough to win, but B, the stars have to align for you to even win once. And for a lot of programs, it's tough to get that to happen. The one time you can really get it to work and sustain it for a little bit is what we've seen a little bit with North Carolina in the last few years with Williams, with Roy. You saw Luke May and that group where you kept the guys just long enough. They were juniors and seniors, plus you had a talent or two in there too. So you have that one injection of star talent, but you also have guys who have been there long enough, know how to win, and can sustain you for 2 to 3 years for a run of some kind. But if you're going, as you said, like a Duke, like anyone else, insert them here, it's tough. UConn has got enough talent they've sustained, so they've carried some guys over from year to year. This is the first year they kind of have a somewhat newer team. They're losing a little bit here and there, and they're still going to be good. But it is more difficult because you lose a lot of the guys who were your base, who stuck it out through the bad, got you to good, came and stayed for great, and then now you're here.
You know what you're not finding today, especially on the basketball side of it? What's been a word that's been the buzzword now for 10 years? Culture. That's the buzzword.
Yeah.
Well, culture it's one of those that, it's like the wind, right? You can't necessarily see it, but you can feel it. And culture only happens when you have people who have been in the pipeline with you that see the older player tell you how the locker room should be, see the older player as to how they do a practice, see the older player as to how they end up looking at video and how they do film work, how they treat and interact with the coaching staff, that then sets the tone for you to then grow through the system. And that doesn't exist in basketball anymore. When I hear coaches say, and our strong culture, your strong culture what? You're a mishmash of players. You start over again in July.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what college basketball is now. I mean, the number of guys that I go through and say, well, this is his third school. Your third school. Right. I mean, and it's, the sport is older, right? Which, by the way, that part is better.
Yeah.
But there's so much movement of players that the word culture
is lost.
Is one that you don't have people around long enough.
You need a steady flow of guys who are there for 3 to 4 years and overlap with the guy who's going to then be there for 3 to 4 years, and then the next guy. You need like one or two players who are going to be there to keep it continuous.
Let me give you an example, okay? It was a great example for Drew Aller to be with Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford, the way he watched tape, how he watched tape, went about his business, right? Drew naturally wanted to do that anyway, but he also saw somebody doing that that's older than him that he backed up, and it influenced him.
How big has it been for guys to have Sal Wormley there for what, 5 or 6 years?
Yeah.
Like, it's huge. He's a culture level setter guy. Like, that's what you need, is players who Sal Wormley may not be the first overall pick in the draft,
right?
But he's a guy you want and every program needs to have.
Do you know how many times Torrey Castro Fields is going to get a Super Bowl ring with the Eagles? When Torrey Castro Fields was here, the number of times I saw him at a practice pull a younger defensive back aside and say, hey, look, you've got to play it this way, you got to play it this way, you got to play it this way. Now that's culture. Right? That's culture. And with all the changes and the movement, especially in college basketball, you don't have, it goes back to the Indiana thing. It feels like every year you've got interchangeable parts, and coaches are starting maybe not necessarily from scratch, but they're trying to put the jigsaw puzzle together.
That's why
in the summertime to give them the best shot to win.
That's why for Mike to have Ace and have Nick come with him.
Yeah, we thought that was.
We thought it was going to be huge because, again, they understood what he wanted from them and they understood the culture. And injuries and other things have derailed it, but that was a big piece of it, is like you're getting a guy and two of them who understand what Mike wants and what a coach is asking you to do and can help you set that culture.
And then you do bring a guy like Puff who got it. He understood it.
He buys in, and all of a sudden, everyone else starts to buy in around them. And then you get someone who, let's say, after this season, hypothetically, Ace is out of eligibility or someone else.
He is. Yeah.
Then he leaves, and then someone else takes that mantelpiece over and says, well, I now know because of what he taught me how to take that mantle. Right. And then 20 years later, everyone gets it.
And this is not, I'm not talking Penn State here. I'm just talking about the sport in general. At this particular point, that's where we are with it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's a lot.
And believe me, next year, starting in the fall, I mean, there's going to be more money flowing to the players, and it's going to bring with it expectations by fans, both when they do something with their phones that years ago would have been illegal. But is very much legal now. That brings with it a level of anger because they will have cost you money potentially. And if a game's not going well, they're like, well, the quarterback's probably making X amount of money, and you feel like you're watching pro sports. Okay.
Yeah. Oy vey.
Thank you for listening to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a 7 Mountain Media production. Come back at 11 every weekday for analysis of the latest happening in the sports landscape. From college football to European soccer, Steve and Kyle cover it all on Sports Talk with Steve Jones.